Join the Coven. Today's video is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering my listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/GothicRose and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title for free and start listening. It's that easy. Just go to audibletrial.com/GothicRose to get started today. Hello, my coven. First, before we get into the stories, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to our featured narrator, Monsters in My Mind, for agreeing to be featured in this video. If you like what you hear, make sure you click on his channel link, which I have left in the description down below, and subscribe to him. You won't be disappointed. The Touch of Death. Written by FunInteractive. I was 8 years old the first time I felt the touch of death. Riding my bicycle down the sidewalk, I felt skeletal fingers, cold and spinely, grasp my heart. In my ears, I heard the banshee's silent song, a promise of emptiness and the void beyond. Terrified, I stopped, nearly falling off my bike, only to see a truck miss me by less than a yard and crash head first into a flower shop. I felt death 2 more times in my life. The first, I was at an airport, ready to fly back home for the holidays. 2 steps before boarding my flight, death thrummed, clawing its vice-like fingers in my chest once more. Frozen with whispered visions of eternity, I collapsed on the spot. By the time the paramedics resuscitated me, I found that the plane had already crashed. Engine failure at 12,000 feet. The second, I went to use the bathroom after a long shopping spree, washing my hands. The familiar caress of death returned, my body turning cold with only my heartbeat thumping loudly in my ears. I reached out for the mirror, but froze in place before I touched it. I must have been a sight to behold, hunched over, knuckles tightly gripping the countertop and white from the strain, hands outstretched as if I were trying to clutch the last wisps of life. After I recovered, I learned that I had dodged a shooting in the mall outside, less than a dozen yards away from where I stood. Once again, the touch of death had saved me. I read once that people become fearless after brushing closely with death. It was certainly true in my case. I took up rock climbing, skydiving, water skiing, a dozen other dangerous hobbies. It was exhilarating. The confidence from having felt death and survived made me free and careless. If anything, that was my downfall. Strolling through a desolate park at midnight, I felt a blunt force strike me in the back of the head. When I came to, I was chained to a wall. A man, my kidnapper, loomed with his back to me, heating up a rusty saw until the teeth were red hot. Hearing my muffled cries, he turned around and smiled wide. Excitedly, he spoke. "Oh, we're going to have so much fun." It was only then I realized the only thing more terrifying than the touch of death is the absence of it. I've watched her for a while now, Written by Baybon.
She is such a careful person. She always has her head on a swivel, and her gut instinct is pretty spot on. I usually keep my distance, but I have sat next to her while she drank her coffee on the weekends. I haven't struck up a conversation with her because I find it irrelevant. My patience has finally paid off. She has taken a new job in a new city and has given her notice at her old job. There is a 4-day interval where she will be on the road. I like that she wants to see the country as she moves across it, but it's going to be the only time where no one will know where she is. She must be so happy to be moving on with her career. How unfortunate for her that it's all for naught. I know her love of a good diner. She can't help herself when it comes to a classic American cheeseburger and a cherry Coke. Hell, I can't even remember the last time I indulged myself on the simpler things in life. I see her walk into the diner, grabbing a booth and a menu. I signaled the waitress as I approached the woman and sit across from her in her booth. "Please, sweetheart," I sneered. "A loaded double cheeseburger with fries and a cherry Coke. Let's not pretend you didn't know what you wanted the moment you pulled into the parking lot." She puts the menu down and gives me a look that would kill a lesser man. "Do you know how long I had to study you before I could get you in a position like this?" I bragged. She looks around and sees the other patrons in the diner, including the staff, all staring at her. Her voice is shrill but quiet. "You should be on your knees before me." She begins to draw her arcane symbols in the air, but to no avail. She goes to grab her hex bag, only to find it has no power within these walls. I smiled at her as the waitress brings me my coffee. I took a sip and knocked on the walls of the diner. This right here is made of a nice little blend of oak, salt, sage, and iron. Each piece of wood, each brick, was blessed by a priest of the old gods. You know the ones that kicked your kind out millennia ago. I laugh. How many times do I have to teach your kind this lesson?
I returned to my childhood home and realized why my parents had rules against the forest. A story written by Distorted Realities.
Stay on the path. Don't get curious. Never enter the ruins. These rules had been ingrained in my head ever since I was a child. There was never any explanations, though my parents weren't people who normally explained their rules to me anyways. These rules, however, always stuck out to be the silliest to me. What kind of child doesn't get curious about things? With no explanation, I had to find out. The first time I tried to go to those ruins, my mother caught me and brought me back to home. I got a lecture and quite a harsh punishment. Let's just say that, after I was caught, I didn't even feel safe thinking about the ruins when my parents were around. And I didn't dare mention them until much, much later. It was the summer of 1998, and I had just turned 24 when I came to visit my childhood home. Well, the fact that it was a childhood home wasn't why I came to visit in the first place. I never really felt much love for that place, even if some of the memories there brought a smile to my face upon remembering them. The people who moved in after us were a lovely young couple who needed somebody to babysit their children while they went on a month-long holiday to Brazil. I was in need of cash, and the idea wasn't so bad. They were very nice kids after all. The area was just as beautiful as I remembered it. Our house was up the hill, right in the clearing of a forest grove with wild mosses, flowers, and trees. The creek nearby roared under the sound of birds chirping. A deer skittered past and stopped to stare at my car before running off once more when a sound came from somewhere nearby. When I arrived at the house, the first thing the mother told me was to ensure the children did not go into the forest alone. When I inquired as to why, she shot a look at her husband, who cleared his throat and told me that there was something dangerous in the woods. I tried to press, but they seemed to get uncomfortable with the topic, and I didn't want to press my luck with the people who were employing me. Still, this information was intriguing. I had heard many stories from the children of my neighborhood about wild creatures who dwelled at night, but I had always brushed them off as silly fairy tales. Certainly, creatures like leprechauns, fairies, and basilisks couldn't exist, right? Now, remembering my parents' rules and these friends' warnings, I couldn't help but wonder what was so dangerous about the forest. In the middle of the third week I was there, something happened that I'm not proud of. I left the gate of the porch unlocked when I was bringing in groceries. The children were inside watching TV while I put everything away, and I suppose I simply forgot. Normally this wouldn't matter, but, well, this was a major mistake. And the events that followed are, without a doubt, my fault. I could have prevented it all. "Where's Benjamin?" Susan asked. She was the younger of the girls and one of my favorites. She always offered to help me with dinners and did the best she could to have good behavior. It was an innocent question, but it made my heart drop. An expression of confusion wiped over her little face as she asked me what was wrong, but I couldn't respond. I didn't know where her little brother was, and I was the one in charge. I immediately started rushing around the house, calling out his name with what could only be described as pure panic. I felt like I was going to throw up. If this little boy went missing because I wasn't paying careful enough attention, I was never going to forgive myself. I was already starting to think of all the scenarios he could be in. His siblings joined me in calling him. A 6-year-old girl, 9-year-old boy, and 12-year-old girl were all yelling for their brother because a 24-year-old wasn't responsible enough. Mason's voice shook as he called out for me from downstairs before his older sister, Megan, screamed. I practically flung myself down the stairs and was panting hard by the time I got to them. "What is it?" I demanded. "What happened to him?" I almost threw up again when I saw his shaking hand point to the open gate. "He talked about wanting to go to the ruins earlier," Megan gasped out through heavy breaths. "I should have told him no meaner. I didn't take him seriously. Mom and Dad always tell us to stay away from those ruins. There has to be something bad there. You have to do something. You can't let him get hurt." I told the children to stay inside and to call the cops if I didn't come back when nightfall came. I was very clear about that. I think, from how harsh I was towards them, they understood. Even little Susie seemed to know there was something very, very wrong. Then I took off, with nothing but adrenaline keeping me from collapsing into a ball of anxiety and tears. It took me a long while to find the path again. It had been so long since I was a child who broke my parents' trust. But when I found it, something inside me snapped. His blanket was laying near the path to the ruins, and that's what really confirmed it for me and brought me to have the courage to go into those damned ruins. I couldn't let a little boy die in there. When I walked into the ruins, I found his teddy bear at the entrance. That sight alone easily made my stomach churn with horror. The walls were covered in paintings of people with blindfolds, including children. Strange beings were chasing them. Some people were dead. Those were the people without the blindfolds. How unnerving. The voice in my head was snickering about how scared I was. Yeah, because that's what I needed at the moment. The temple seemed to have weird sounds, and I wondered if it were my footsteps or something lurking deeper within the place that nobody was supposed to see. It took me 3 rooms until I found Benjamin's body. His face was contorted into that of horror, and he was completely stiffened. I looked all over his body, but he didn't have any marks or wounds indicating how he had been killed. I even checked his throat to see if he had been choked, but there was nothing lodged in there either. It was as if he had just dropped on the floor, killed by some unseen murderer with a snap of their fingers. I tucked his teddy bear into his arms with silent tears rolling down my face. How did he die? How is he dead so soon? I thought to myself. I picked up his small, limp body and turned around to run back out of the room when I stopped in my tracks. The odd paintings on the wall, the strange sounds coming from all around the ruined temple, the look on Benjamin's little face, everything made sense. The basilisk, a creature who kills by making eye contact with you. I couldn't feel my body when I dropped. I woke up in the hospital days later. The doctors told me that, underneath all the ruins, there must have been a very dangerous and potent chemical. A chemical potent enough to paralyze me from the waist down and to kill the little boy I found within. Funny thing is, no chemical like that ever showed up on either of our scans. I know what I saw. I know that nobody at that damned hospital would believe me, or believe me enough not to send me to that damn nut house. But I know what lurks in the forest. Listen to the warnings. Stay on the path. Don't get curious. Never enter the ruins.